The New Plague is one of the most infamous creations in Azerothian history. It has been used for vengeance, it has been used for personal gain, and it has allowed the Forsaken to become one of the most concerning as well as one of the most powerful peoples on the planet. But its history, the background surrounding the New Plague, is something that is usually forgotten, especially by those who believe Sylvanas Windrunner once upon a time, was a good leader, with her only flaw being that she is dead, or well, undead. Believe me, that is not the case, and the very existence of the New Plague proves it. And for said reasons, we are going to talk about it today. Today, we are going to discuss the history of the New Plague. But our story begins long before the New Plague was even discussed in feasibility. Our story actually begins during the Third War, the Legion's second direct attack on Azeroth. In said war, the Burning Legion sought to split Azeroth between two forces to essentially divide and conquer. On the Eastern Kingdoms, the undead were deployed against the mortal races of the continent. And on Kalimdor, the Legion, led by Archimonde, sought to directly invade and use the waters beneath the World Tree of Nordrassil to empower the demonic commander and open the way for a massive planetary invasion akin to what they did during the War of the Ancients and their third invasion during Legion. Now, for the sake of the video, it doesn't much matter what's going on Kalimdor. Our focus is in the east, where the Legion unleashed a plague that culminated in, well, you know.
What is this? What are you doing, my son?
Succeeding you, father.
Arthas, under the directives of Ner'zhul, returned to Lordaeron, sacked his own kingdom, then made his way to the Sunwell of Quel'Thalas, where Ranger General Sylvanas Windrunner was turned into a banshee, enslaved to the Scourge, and watched as her people suffered. Now, there's a lot more to it than that, but I'm just glossing it through for the sake of this video. But it's important to understand these things, because it was due to such events that led to Sylvanas' desire for vengeance against Arthas and the Scourge. So once Arthas had brought ruin to the northern continent of the Eastern Kingdoms and departed his way to Icecrown, Sylvanas saw an opportunity and led a revolt against the Scourge of Lordaeron. With the help of a certain Dreadlord, the Banshee managed to free those under the Lich King's control and establish a new faction with one goal in mind: kill Arthas, no matter the cost. This new faction would be called the Forsaken.
From here on out, we shall be known as the Forsaken. We will find our own path in this world, Dreadlord, and slaughter anyone who stands in our way.
And it was decided that, in some sort of twisted form of ironic justice, that the vengeance of the Forsaken and their Banshee Queen would come in the form of the very thing that doomed Lordaeron to the undead: a plague. But it couldn't just be any old plague. It had to be a different one, a plague that could not only kill the living, but also target the undead, as Arthas himself was no longer living, nor were his servants around him. And so, under the direct orders from Sylvanas herself, work began on this new plague. Now, quick side note: if you were wondering where exactly the Forsaken got the general idea for the new plague, well, here's something to think about. The Dreadlords, the Nathrazim, they have access to the Shadowlands. We know this to be true, as they were the ones that delivered Frostmourne and the Helm of Domination to the Burning Legion. Varimathras, a Dreadlord, was allied with Sylvanas at the time of her rise to power, so it's probable to suggest that the idea for the plague actually stemmed from the House of Plagues in Maldraxxus. And I say this because it's no secret that the House of Plagues, spoilers, they develop plagues. These plagues are obviously going to need to kill the dead, since Well, everyone in the Shadowlands is already dead, so that would need to be a key factor in its development. So you can see where 2 and 2 can be put together. But of course, that is all just speculation, so take that with a grain of salt. Back to the new plague. Regardless of how ever the idea became feasible, work began almost immediately following the creation of the Undercity, and was well into development 4 years after Archimonde was defeated atop Mount Hyjal. In fact, during the events of Vanilla WoW, you can actually help the Royal Apothecary Society construct and test their plague during the events of both Tirisfal Glades and Silver Pine Forest, which is actually our first introduction to the new plague as an entity within the lore of Warcraft. So no, the plague was not something made up for Wrath of the Lich King, and yes, if you quested through Tirisfal and Silverpine, you actually aided in the plague's creation. Good job, Horde. You really did it. And it is actually because of these blind efforts during then that during the war in Northrend, the plague was finalized and used for the first time in one of the most infamous events in Warcraft history, an event that actually provoked the renewal of war between the Alliance and Horde, which in turn set the foundation for every single event that followed. The Wrathgate.
Did you think we had forgotten? Did you think we had forgiven? Behold now the terrible vengeance of the Forsaken!
Sylvanas.
Death to the Scourge! And death to the living! Now, all can see. This is the hour of the Forsaken.
The plague was deployed in canisters, and the main objective of the attack was to kill Arthas when he showed his face, regardless of whatever casualties the Alliance or Horde took in the process. Of course, there was the whole Putris betrayal, but that is an entirely different topic for an entirely different day. But a quick take, for those wondering, it's fairly obvious that it was Sylvanas who ordered the plague to be used at the Wrathgate. After all, the attack on the Backador to Icecrown was the main objective of the Alliance-Horde war effort, and Arthas would have surely shown his face during the battle, but then Putris used the opportunity to start a revolt. Again, that is a topic for another time. As for the plague, it was used and it was successful. It killed both living and dead and almost near did Arthas in. In fact, the plague was so successful that the bioweapon would see widespread use by the Forsaken in the following conflicts, namely during the Alliance-Horde War and the recently ended Fourth War. But that's not to say that the plague was without its faults. From what we've seen firsthand, the plague is susceptible to potent magics such as dragon fire or ice conjured through the arcane. This is probably due to the fact that both fire and arcane are direct opposites of the unholy on the cosmic chart, so they don't necessarily react good together. But despite these drawbacks, the plague is still pretty deadly. Luckily, the place the plague was made was bombed into oblivion, ironically by the plague itself, and the Alliance still holds a grip over Lordaeron, denying any who might try to reclaim its manufacturing labs to this very day. As for the future of the plague, well, who knows what that might hold. With Sylvanas ousted, likely to die in the coming months, the Forsaken have been left abandoned, unsure of where the future leads. Whenever their next leader emerges, whether it be a Minithil, a council, or whatever or whoever, the plague will no doubt play a role in the future of the state of the undead. Maybe the Forsaken will finally renounce the bioweapon and turn a new leaf. Or maybe the plague will remain a part of their identity, to only be used as a last resort against the enemies of Azeroth and beyond. Who knows? Your guess is as good as mine. If you have any questions or comments about this video, Warcraft, or its lore, feel free to leave them down below, and I'll be sure to read each and every one of them. Thanks for watching, and remember well.